Thank you again for joining us today for our webinar that we're calling From Thought to Action, 3 Strategies for Bringing Your Strategic Plan to Life. We want to take a few moments, myself and my colleague Samantha, we're going to introduce ourselves. My name is Rani Banjarian. I'm a consultant at Education Elements. I'm based out of Nashville, Tennessee, and a lot of the work that I've done with Ed Elements has been centered around either personalized and blended learning, data culture, and strategic planning. I have I've had the opportunity to see a strategic planning development process from start to finish recently with a district in New York State. And we are now in the first year of implementation and monitoring with them. And so all of what we're going to discuss today feels very relevant to some of the work that's actually living out in one of the districts that I'm supporting. And I'll hand it off to Samantha to introduce herself.
Hi, everyone. I'm Samantha Ritchie. I'm also a consultant at Education Elements and recently completed 2 strategic planning products with districts in New York as well, and was able to come up with some really strong templates, tools, and structures around implementation. And today we have 3 objectives that we want to cover with you all today and talk through crafting the right objectives and initiatives, cultivating the right teams for the job, as well as establishing structures to monitor the progress of your initiatives. And like Rani was saying, we do have a lot of templates and things to show you that you can bring back to your folks right away, which is exciting.
Just for the sake of folks on the call that may not be familiar with who we are and what we do, I want to take just a few moments to introduce ourselves and the work that we do. We are Education Elements. We are actually, we've been around for 12 years now. We have partnered with over 1,000 schools and school districts, and our motto is that schools grow when people grow. And part of the mantra that we're hoping to share with you and live out today is this idea of responsive planning. So yes, as a district, as part of the healthy goings on, like the business as usual of a district, is to think about strategic planning every 5 or 10 years. Also thinking about this idea of responsive planning. How can you be really responsive to the needs of your community and your students? We have been redesigning education since 2010, and some of the work that we support and with some of the ways that we partner with districts, in addition to supporting with strategic planning, design and development and implementation, we do all sorts of things, including responsive leadership. We do some work around equity, personalized learning, teacher retention, and data culture. And so if any of these things, are ringing a bell in your head, potentially these are some other ways that we can support you and your district in the future. The first thing that we'd like to do is, and this is something that we're trying out that's new, is we've put together this protocol. One of the ways that we understand strategic planning is kind of the healthy, a healthy district and healthy goings on in the district necessarily include at specific points every 5, 7, or 10 years, just thinking about what are our priority areas. Are we living at our priority areas? And so wherever you are in your journey at the district that you're at or the district that you support, as you're gearing up for the second quarter of school year 22-23, you might consider doing a pulse check. If you are just now maybe starting to consider doing another strategic plan or closing out the past 5 years and maybe doing some adjustments to some priority areas going into the next 5 years, here are some things that we have seen that district leaders and administrators consider some of these indicators as they're starting to think about, hey, is now the right time to start thinking about bringing some of the focus areas of our strategic plan to life as well.
So one of the things to think about with strategic planning is responsive planning. And the plan that you develop needs to be able to prioritize the process over the product, because one of the things that we realize is strategic plans go for a long period of time, 5 years. And so you'll want to be able to have a plan that can sustain, adapt, and pivot as your school and your school's needs pivot, right? There might be things that come up that you'll need to change and adapt. And it's really important to have systems and structures and teams in place that can respond to those changes. So in order to develop this type of responsive plan, we recommended education elements, including all stakeholders or all team members, into a feedback loop. And so what we mean by this is making sure that the teams that you have are intentionally built so that they're all speaking and communicating to each other weekly, right? Whatever the cadence you want to be, to keep folks engaged and to be actively involved in the process, and getting regular feedback, giving one another feedback is important, so that the plan can sustain over time. And what you'll want to consider too, as you start to think about these plans and how you want to make this work over time, is asking yourself the current state of your district. How does the current strategic plan live in the district? Are people seeing it? Is it public facing? Do families know about this, right? What was the experience of writing the current plan look like? Was it 5 people at a table and then no one else sees it, right? We want to make sure that the whole community is involved. How would stakeholders describe the plan? How would teachers, other leaders describe the plan? Do they know what the goals are for the next 5 years? And another thing to ask is, how are you monitoring and or wrapping up your current plan? So what are the systems in place to actually put ideas into action? And if any of the answers to those questions are, not sure, or you think that maybe there needs to be some changes made, perhaps you can start to ask yourself, well, where do you hope the district will go in 5 years, right? Do some big picture visioning, like what are we hoping for in 2027? Also, what new initiatives, practices, or structures would you like to see? And then another question you can ask, which is really great, is that you can ask a student what they're learning, right? What will they say? And so putting it into the hands of kids who are experiencing school every day can be a great way to do a pulse check on where you're at with your strategic plan.
Thank you, Samantha. So the first of the 3 strategies is thinking about crafting the right objectives and initiatives. And one of the ways that we found that has been really powerful in understanding what even is a strategic plan is thinking of the anatomy of a strategic plan as a house or a building or a structure, starting with the roof and the awning at the top, all the way down to the foundations of the house. And I'm going to very quickly kind of walk through each of these components of the strategic plan. And then I want to point out where we have found that districts often begin to lag, and then unfortunately sometimes will stop in terms of actually bringing the strategic plan to life. And hopefully some of what we share in the next couple of minutes resonates with you. And so, going through each of these components of the strategic plan, beginning with mission, vision, and beliefs, we like to think of those 3 as what we call the strategic direction, why we exist, where we want to go, and what we believe in. And usually, anybody that's working at a district is able to articulate those things. This is our strategic direction, or on the district website, this is what we say the mission and vision of our district is. And then when you think about focus areas or priority areas or pillars of the plan for the next 5 years, these are the things that could be 2 priority areas, could be up to 7 priority areas. What will you prioritize in the upcoming X number of years, 3 to 5 years, for example? And then as you go further and further along into the structure, you're thinking about objectives, KPIs, key performance indicators, goals, specific actions that you want to implement in order to live out the priority areas, in order to live out your beliefs, your core beliefs, as well as ultimately so that you can live out your mission and vision. And so we find that with the districts that we work with, this idea of a strategic direction is pretty solid. Often districts that we work with, if we start working with them for the first time, we'll have a pretty solid idea, at least, of what their mission, vision, and core beliefs are. And perhaps they might have a sense of what some of these priority areas are. But usually we find that this is where the momentum begins to lag. And unfortunately, sometimes it can also come to a halt because there is, for any number of reasons, there are challenges and constraints, resource allocation and otherwise. Maybe this is not a priority for the district, or it's tough to prioritize this work in terms of actually articulating the objectives. This is the impact that we want to have with this particular focus area. These are specific projects or ideas or goals or actions that we want to implement. And so we're going to walk you through a process that we have undergone with a few of our districts in the past year or so. So this is cutting edge, but a lot of it might seem familiar. And then we'll also share a template as well that we've used with some districts in the past. And so I'm going to give you an example. We're going to walk through the template. So the idea here is that it's one thing to identify what your focus area is, and it's another to really bring together a group of people that is representative of the community and really define your focus area. For example, one of the districts that we've worked with recently defined one of their focus areas as this idea of clear and targeted communications. That's what came out of a round of community engagement. We supported the district. We went out and held a bunch of focus groups, and we held a few town halls, and we sent out the district sent out a comprehensive survey. And from the feedback that was collected from the community, it came out that amongst 4 really pressing areas that need to be prioritized, this idea of clear and targeted communications from school admin and from district leadership is really, really important for the folks in the community. And so what do we do now? What does the district do now? And so the first thing that was really important for the teams that were the planning teams that were putting this together and hoping to begin to design some experiences to bring this to life is to articulate the strategic objective. Why is this a priority for the district? Why is it that we heard from the stakeholders and from people in our community that this is something that needs to be diagnosed, that this is a challenge that we've been facing and that we need to begin to find a solution for? So articulate the strategic objective, what you heard from stakeholders, and next articulate the impact. So I have my pillars. I've identified my focus areas as a district. What do we need to do now in order to bring this to life? Next, it's important that you articulate why this work matters. Why is this pillar important to your community? And then think about all of the dimensions that this might be important for your community, thinking about all of the different subsets of your population demographics, thinking about does this focus area promote diversity, equity, and inclusion? Is this pillar really relevant to the community in the way that we've defined it and described it right now? And so it's important to really spend some time, again, with a team of folks that is as much as possible representative of folks in the community to really tease out some of these ideas so that you are thinking about all of the potential roadblocks of why this focus area might not be relevant to our community, but also making sure that you are generating buy-in with as large a subset of your community as possible. Next, something that we like to do is we like to frame these problems or these challenges that come out of stakeholder engagement, that have come out of the survey or from some of the conversations that you've had with folks in your community. We like to frame them as challenge statements. This is a Mad Lib that we sometimes use with districts because it's very straightforward. And so if you think of different subsets of your community as users, so for example, if you're thinking of elementary students at my district, or parents at my district, or community members who do not have children at our schools, these could be subsets of your community. And so you would, begin to craft a challenge statement around one of these users or one of these constituent groups. And then you want to think about their needs. What do they need? Staff and teachers, or maybe high school staff, need differentiated professional development. Maybe that's something that you heard from a focus group with high school staff, and that's something that has come out. And so that's one of the challenge statements that you would articulate. High school staff need differentiated professional development. So that, insert a compelling reason or an outcome. For example, in this case, it could be so that they extend their practice in the way that they see fit. And so you go through and you think about all of the trends that have come out from the stakeholder surveys and the stakeholder engagement and talking to all of these different constituent groups. And you begin to articulate these challenge statements. What do you do with these challenge statements is you start to think about how you can reframe them as what we like to call how might we questions or how might we statements. As you see on the slide, how might we questions or statements deepen your challenge statements as areas of opportunity. And so instead of saying high school staff need differentiated professional development, and that's a framing of a problem, you might reframe it as how might we support high school staff in pursuing differentiated professional development. In the next couple of slides, we'll give you a few examples from real life districts that we've worked with. So before you begin coming up with ideas around how you can bring this focus area to life, you can brainstorm ideas using this how might we protocol. So we have these challenges, how might we address these challenges? And it's important to think about your locus of control. What actions are you going to take to drive change? So over the course of the next two slides, and I'll take a pause here for a moment to give you a chance to read them. These are a couple of challenge statements and focus areas that have come out from a district that we have worked with recently. And I'll hand it off to Samantha to kind of frame, read through, and give you a chance to digest what you see on the screen.
Yeah, sure. So one of the needs was around student voice and choice. And so the district came up with the statement that students need a greater sense of agency and choice in learning experiences so that they can have more enrichment and well-rounded exposure. So I thought about who the population was, what the need is, and then the impact on that need. And then they came up with how might we statements. And so started to ask questions around how might we bring in community members, retirees, graduates, et cetera, to augment class learning with real world experience. How might we define agency for students? And how might we assure student learning choices are meaningful and further educational goals and outcomes? And so all of these how might we statements are without any constraints. We're just thinking about like, how might we have answers to this question, right? How might we involve other people so that students can have more enrichment and well-rounded exposure? And again, these are just throwing at the wall, right? Anything that might stick and starting to brainstorm and ideate ideas. And another one, just to give you all a high school example, was around rigorous and worthwhile course offerings. And so the need was that the district needs to continue to develop our course offerings to include additional real world experiences so that we create a well-rounded approach to teaching the whole child. And again, some of the how might we statements were how might we ensure that high school students leave the high school with real life skills, with what they need to succeed in the world beyond just academics, right? So that relates to the whole child. How might we define what we mean when we say the whole child? And how might we provide more functional academic offerings for students of all ability levels in order to provide the best preparation for post-secondary work and life? So again, y'all, just want to name, these are just big ideas that people have come up with, and you can start answering these questions, and it really gives a pathway to start creating ideas around what the strategic plan pillars might look like. I encourage you to watch this video. I've seen it like 7 times. It's awesome. But what this woman talks about is something around divergent and convergent thinking. And when you're divergent thinking, you're brainstorming anything possible. There's no constraints, no limits, no amount of money, no amount of people, just anything in your wildest dreams. You're just thinking about all of the ideas to help you when you have those challenge statements. And then when you're convergent thinking, then you start to think about some of the constraints, right? And so you'll think about how you might make choices towards solution and resolution in the ideas that you want to see come to life. Anything to add there, Rani?
I would just say one thing around this idea of divergent and convergent thinking. From a few slides ago, when you saw some of those thought bubbles, those speech bubbles with the three "how might we" statements, those weren't the only ones that came up. In fact, because we followed and those teams that we worked with, those teams followed this process of divergent thinking. They actually came up with 30 plus "how might we" statements. So, like Samantha was saying, no constraints, no holds barred, throwing anything at the wall. Just how might we, solve this problem? And then, and Samantha's going to walk you through that process now, is how do we take those 30, 40, 50 statements that are totally unconstrained and think about, okay, what are the actual things that are going to bring this focus area to life?
Yeah, and so this is an activity that you can totally do. What you'll want to start doing is once you have those statements, you'll want to start to ideate and brainstorm within three categories. And so you have the "in front of us" category, "beyond the trees" and "over the mountains." And so once you start coming up with these ideas and the "how might we" statements, you'll place them on, a poster board, a whiteboard, whatever it is, and think about what are the opportunities right in front of us, right? The low-hanging fruit, like the things that are easy to do, feasible, maybe like one person can take it on, and it's not going to require a lot of planning. It just can happen right now, right? A small actionable thing. The next pillar is "beyond the trees." And so these things are achievable with some constraints. Maybe it takes some planning. Maybe there needs to be some thought around like the budget, who's going to take this on. And so it has a few constraints, but still achievable over time. And then finally, you'll want to post ideas that are over the mountains, right? Your wildest ideas with absolutely no constraints. And think about maybe coming up with a plan to actually achieve those over the mountain ideas. But it's a great way to start to categorize your ideas and start to bucket them to help you prioritize what might come first.
So as we're thinking about this design process, so you've identified, hey, this is the universe of possibilities. If there were no constraints on resource allocation, if we had infinite money, if we had infinite time, these are all of the things that we could do in order to solve the problem that has the challenge or the problem or the issue that has come up from feedback from stakeholders and constituent groups. So as Samantha was saying, as you start to categorize them, it's important before you start building or before you start project planning for specific ideas, it's important to have a gut check on, hey, is this thing feasible? Is this thing going to have the impact that we want it to have? Is this idea the right idea from the 50 other ideas that we've come up with? And so we have a few considerations that we have used with districts that have always been really helpful to kind of gut check. At this point in the process, we have these really amazing ideas, but do they pass this test? And if they do, then if they are implemented with fidelity, we're likely to see the movement in the needle in some way. But it is important, and sometimes we find that districts forget to do this step. It's important to gut check and see if the ideas that you've come up with are these four things. And so I'll give you all a moment to read what you see on the slide, and I'll just kind of give you an overview. Your ideas need to be concrete. Is this thing a concrete thing that can be implemented at the school level or the district level? Is it measurable? As a district leader or a school leader, can I measure the impact over time? Can I monitor it? Is it aligned to our strategic direction, that roof of the house? Is it aligned to our mission and vision and values and core beliefs? Does it solve our challenge statements? And is it both ambitious and feasible? So is it going to change the status quo, but also can it be done? And so an example we used recently was one of the ideas that came up in a recent planning team meeting was a staff wellness program. And so we took what had come up in terms of brainstorming about what the staff wellness program could look like, and we walked it through these four gut checks, and we wanted to make sure that it passed And we answered yes on all of those things. And if it did, then potentially that would be one of the projects or one of the ideas that you will, that in actuality will bring your focus area and your pillar to life.